It is great to be here, and I'm not going to say a lot about myself. I tell a few stories along the way so you can kind of get some context for why I care about this topic. It's been great visiting with several of you as you've come in about why you're here and what you're looking for, and there does seem to be a common theme in the room about the word compassion when it comes with accountability. Like, wouldn't that be nice? I want to share with you my role models. How many of you, by show of hands, have had a significant role model in your life that's made a difference in who you are, where you are? Thank you. Yes. So 2 role models in my life. First one is my father. He passed away 11 years ago. And I was the son of missionary parents in Africa. And so his philosophy of life was this: always keep your feet firmly planted in midair. That's kind of what we need to be doing now. Be grounded, but be flexible at the same time. I also grew up in Africa in the 1980s during apartheid in South Africa when Nelson Mandela was still in prison in Robben Island. And so I experienced the kind of injustice that is so significant in a place where my parents were trying to make a difference, trying to bring more compassion to that environment. So these are significant role models for me. When Mandela was released from prison and became president of South Africa, his number one job was prevent a civil war. That takes some serious, compassionate accountability. And so here is why Next Element exists. I helped found Next Element in 2008. One of my partners, Aaron Chappell-Deckard, is here, and he'll be helping us with questions later and passing out books. Since the beginning, our goal has been to bring compassion and accountability to more organizations so they can thrive in challenging and complex environments. Those are the environments we are dealing with now. I've written 4 books on this topic, and if you look at the title of the books, you can probably see the progression of our thinking. The first book was Beyond Drama, Transcending Energy Vampires. If you want to geek out on how drama actually shows up in organizations, that's your one. Conflict Without Casualties is where we lay out our formula and framework for how you use conflict as a catalyst and an energy source for producing new and better things instead of tearing us down with drama. Seeing People Through is about personality inclusion. If you think personality is an important aspect of diversity, this book shows you how to actually build it into your organization. And then finally, Compassionate Accountability is the big idea we've been operating from all along. And we're going to be giving out copies of this book afterwards. If you want a copy, you can have one for free. If you want me to sign it, I would be honored. We'll maybe do that downstairs at our booth. So the topic for today: how do you scale compassion and accountability so more people can flourish? How do you do it? In order to do that, I'm going to cover a couple things and share with you our process. First of all, we have to get to the crux of the problem. What really is the problem we're trying to solve here? Second, we have to challenge some myths. The word compassion comes with a lot of baggage, a lot of myths, a lot of understandings, both positive and negative. There are probably some cultures where if you use the word compassion, people will run away. And others where people will be like, yes, please. We have to shift our mindset. Mindset is such a critical foundational part of behavior change. And if we want to change our culture, we have to start by changing the way we see ourselves and other people. We have to have a working definition, and what that means is that we're all on the same page about what are we talking about here, what does it mean, how do we look at it? And we need an elegant framework, and the word elegant doesn't mean necessarily beautiful. It means that it's simple but powerful, it's intuitive, but it's also practical. It's got to work in many, many situations. Finally, it has to focus on observable behavior. It's great to have aspirational mission statements and philosophies and beliefs and theories and research, but if we're not seeing real behavior change around the problems that really matter, I don't think we're really doing the work that we need to do. Outcomes have to be measurable. If we can't measure the impact of what we do, then where do we get our return on the individual? I love that new turn of phrase, ROI. And finally, scalability. That's the last part, is how can we help organizations scale this so that you can quickly and rapidly start to have a common language, a common toolkit that you can build on from there. Let's start by getting to the crux. I'm curious, when you look at these statements on the screen, how many of you can relate to something on this slide? Will you raise your hand if any one of these you've heard before, maybe you've said it, you've thought it, you've had it come back at you? Yeah, look at these. That bottom one I said to my kids a lot growing up. Here's what they all have in common. Every one of these has the same thing in common. One of the biggest barriers to flourishing is the human tendency to think that compassion and accountability are somehow opposites. Like you can have one or the other, but you can't have both. And look back at these statements. Every one of these also tries to make an excuse for it. I don't want to be a jerk, but I'm going to be a jerk. But because I said that, and because I don't like it, then it's okay to do it. But it's like I made a deal with the devil, and now I have to somehow make it okay. I'm just practicing tough love means I was just a jerk to my kids, but I somehow have to make it okay. You're going to thank me later when you grow up. So here's what it comes down to. If we lead and build cultures and systems and processes that prioritize compassion or accountability over compassion, we're going to have negative cultures that cannot keep great people. We can't just be bringing the hammer down all the time and only talking about performance and goals. But the opposite is also a problem. If, on the other hand, we practice compassion without accountability, we create underperforming cultures because we don't talk about the most important stuff. We don't do the hard work and have the hard conversations. This is the problem. The good news is that we don't have to choose. And the reason we shouldn't choose is because here's what's at stake. We saw this coming right out of COVID, and we started to realize no longer can organizations or leaders afford to choose compassion or accountability. If you choose, you lose. Coming out of the pandemic and moving forward, everything our speakers are talking about today are saying that in order for our biggest initiatives to succeed, we have to have compassion in full measure, and we have to have accountability in full measure. This is what's at stake. These are the problems we're trying to solve. And the younger generation, I'll show you a little bit later about how the younger generation, the new talent coming in, they require both in full measure. And if you compromise one or the other, they don't like it and they might leave and you might not be able to keep them. So I don't believe that the purpose of life is to get rid of the struggle. The struggle is here. The struggle is part of being human. It's part of being different. The fact that diversity exists means conflict and struggle is going to exist. The real question is, how do we struggle? And I want to show you 3 ways that we see struggle happening that does not turn out well. The first one is struggling against. As soon as there's a difference, a disagreement, a conflict, there's got to be a winner and a loser, and all of a sudden we're at each other about it. Another kind of struggle is what I call struggling instead of. Are you the worn out, burned out superhero because you make sure everything gets done? Even though the people that were supposed to do it aren't? And you're doing 3 or 4 people's jobs because you're so responsible and you never let a ball drop and you are worn out. This is what's causing our pandemic of burnout, is tired superheroes who are struggling instead of other people. But there's a third kind that I think is even a bigger problem, and that's struggling alone. How many of you or how many of your employees are carrying something inside that matters deeply to them? They care about it. Maybe it's hard. Maybe it's something they're afraid to tell anybody. Maybe they tell themselves they wouldn't understand. They would judge me. Or here's the one that leaders like to say, you have enough of your own problems. I don't want to burden you with mine. And we go on struggling alone. And we feel more lonely, more disconnected. There's a fourth kind of struggle. And this is where the transformation happens. And this comes in the root of the word compassion. Did you know that the Latin root of the word compassion means with suffer? Compassion does not call us to struggle against each other or to struggle instead of each other or to struggle alone. It calls us to struggle together. But how? How do we do that without choosing compassion or accountability? First, we need to challenge some myths. So let's take a look at some of the misconceptions. In my book, I have 5 chapters dedicated to 5 barriers to compassion. I want to just tackle 3 of them really quick for you. The first one is that compassion is way more than just alleviating suffering. Oh, my heart goes out to you and I want to go take away your pain. If I can write a check to the Humane Society and that dog is going to eat, I'm going to feel so much better because I'm going to take away the pain. Now, I don't think the goal of alleviating suffering is necessarily the right goal in a typical work context. Of course, we tackle injustice and violence and really big things like that, but most of the struggle on a day-to-day basis is the kind of struggle that changes us and transforms us and we can learn and grow from. So when I take away your struggle, I'm also taking away your agency, your autonomy, and your capability of learning and growing. Here's another myth. Compassion is more than being nice or kind. It is not nice or kind to let somebody off the hook when they're not doing their job and they're not learning and growing and you're setting them up for failure. We have to have hard conversations. We have to talk about behavior because we live and work in a community where our behavior affects each other. And finally, compassion and accountability are not opposites. Should be obvious by now. These two actually need each other in a really, really critical way. And here's the connection. The only way, and I hate to break this to you, the only way to get from compassion to accountability is with the bridge of conflict. There is no way around it. Conflict is a natural product of diversity. It's a beautiful source of energy that we've been given as human beings, and we can steward that energy in a couple of different ways. I want to share with you an example of compassion, accountability, and action. We were working with CPI, who is the largest provider of crisis response services. Any of you work in healthcare probably have people certified in CPI or mental health, CPI. They asked us to do some work with their leadership team, and we were helping them develop a template for having these kinds of difficult conversations. And the CMO was really upset one day. She said, here's an opportunity for me to practice this. One of my employees went around my back to give feedback to a web developer, contradicting my ideas, and now we have a big confusing mess. You ever had someone go around your back and try to get metal and stuff, and they didn't follow the chain of command properly? She said, on the one hand, I care about this person, but on the other hand, this behavior has to stop. How do we do this? So we helped her craft a introductory conversation using our template. And here's what she said. And I'm just going to give you a chance to read this. So there's a method to what happened here. There's a formula behind the scenes that I'll share with you here in a little bit. One of the things we do with leaders is we do what's called email coaching, where when they have an opportunity like this, she actually emailed me her first draft of what she was going to say, and I coached her according to the rubric that we had practiced. And when we both felt good about it, she went and had the conversation, but we also asked people to let us know how did it go? What happened? What was the outcome? And here's what she sent me after she had the conversation. I was terrified of starting a conversation by telling someone I felt angry. But with your template, it worked. The other person shared with me what they were struggling with. We came to an understanding and we set new boundaries. They even offered a sincere apology. But here's the most important part. I feel more connected and inspired to support them instead of wanting to sabotage them. Have you ever been in difficult conflict with somebody and one, you just wished it would go away? Maybe you wish they would go away. Maybe you hope they would just do something so catastrophic that you could quickly eliminate the problem and never actually have to talk about the conflict. What this shows, though, is I want to emphasize that it always starts here. It started with her choosing to see herself and her employee differently. And she engaged differently, and it changed her from the inside out. Going from wanting to sabotage her employee to actually feeling more connected with that employee, that's struggling with. And notice how the employee took a very active role in solving the problem. Took ownership, had ideas, disclosed some information that they didn't know. So in order to have these kinds of conversations, we have to start thinking differently, and we have to change our mindset. So we've been doing about 20 years of training people in these kinds of behavioral skills, leaders, managers, all sizes of organizations. And what we have come to ask ourselves every single day is why, under conditions like today, when you have all of this opportunity to learn and grow, why do some people fly and flourish and some people stay on the ground? How many of you here, by show of hands, are in L&D? Okay, do you ever ask yourself that question? Why? They're not stupid. They're not unmotivated. They really kind of do want to do good, and they're trying hard. How come they just don't get it? Turns out that it has to do with mindset. Here's the difference. We did a lot of social science research, brain science research, learning research, and we looked at our data, and what we come to learn is that these people that flourish have three things that they see differently. They see themselves as valuable, capable, and responsible. But they also see other people as valuable, capable, and responsible. And that changes everything. So we turn this into a model. We call it the 3 switches of the compassion mindset. And you can get lots of details about it in the book. And we're actually launching an e-course on November 1st that teaches this. Think of mindset like switches that control the flow of energy. When the switches are on, and you can go turn the switches on, and the lights come on, and you can see clearly. But when the switches are off, it's dark, and we stumble around in our relationships and our companies. But here's the key, is you get to turn the switches on. It's your choice every day. Are your switches going to be on or off in how you see yourself and other people? This is not a learned skill. This is a choice we make, an attitude we have every day. So I want to go through each one of these switches really quick and give you an idea about what it is we're talking about here. The switch of value is about, do we see ourselves as unconditionally worthy of being seen, heard, affirmed, invited, and included? This might sound like an inclusion mantra, right? We are all valuable. When the switch is turned on, we see ourselves and other people as innately worthy of respect, not conditional on their qualities, where they come from, their ethnic background, their education, whatever. But when the switch is turned off, we say, you know what? People's value is conditional on whatever it is you fill in the blank. That sets the stage for prejudice and discrimination right there, when we start to think that a person's value might be not innate. The second switch is the switch of capability, because here's one of my beefs with most inclusion efforts. If we stop by only saying everybody's valuable, we're going to stall out and hit a wall, because people are also capable. You bring gifts and skills and experience and lived experiences and all of this stuff to the table. So we also have to turn on the next switch, which says, because you are capable, you deserve to be invited, asked to participate, invested in, and challenged to learn and grow, and given resources to do that. And when the switch is on, we do those things. But when the switch is off, we see limitations instead of possibilities. We see failure as a sign of threat. We see differences as something to be squashed and eliminated. But here's the thing. People are not just valuable, and they're not just capable. The third switch is the switch of responsibility. We can't talk about compassion and struggling with each other unless we acknowledge the fact that we live and work in relationships, and our behavior matters, and our behavior affects each other. So the third switch is the switch of responsibility. Because we are responsible, everyone is 100% responsible for their feelings, their thoughts, and their behaviors. No more and no less. That's the challenge. We are all 100% responsible for our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. No more, no less. If I'm struggling instead of you, I am trying to be too responsible for your behaviors. If I say a phrase like, how did that make you feel? What I've just said is, you're not responsible for your feelings. Think about that. She ticked me off, so therefore you're responsible for my feelings, huh? Therefore, I don't have to be responsible for how I respond, right? Because it's your fault. Think about those subtle things we do when that switch is turned off. So what we have found is when cultures have their switches off, and we are treating people as conditionally valuable, not capable of change, and we're isolating responsibility, here is what we start to see. It all comes down to how we see ourselves and each other, and how the systems and processes and procedures start to support that. But when the switches are turned on, we see each other and ourselves as innately worthy of respect, as having the possibility of learning and growing, and we share responsibility, which means no matter what happened before, I'm still 100% responsible for what I choose to do next. So we just published an article in TD Magazine, which is a magazine of the Association for Talent Development. It's called Power Up Learning Outcomes by Turning on the Switches. And this article specifically applies these 3 switches to if you are in L&D. How do you leverage these switches as a primer, as a way to get people ready to learn and grow? So once we discovered the switches, we started all of our trainings by simply spending 30 minutes introducing the switches, getting group norms about how are we going to keep our switches on, and then we check in about the switches every day. Turns out our outcomes improved by 20 to 30% for the same coursework. And we were able to get through the coursework about 20% faster.